This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
It is not a foregone conclusion that LeBron James is going to stay in Miami. Mickey Harrison knows it. Pat Riley knows it. The entire Heat organization knows it. Their priority is to keep LeBron James. They will pull out all the stops to keep LeBron James. I wouldn't bet against Pat Riley because not only are you Pat Riley, the same individual who, when he was recruiting LeBron James and went to Cleveland to talk to him, took the rings and put it on the table.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And in immortal words of Wu-Tang Clan, could it be all so simple? Out in Miami, the drama unfolds. And as we continue to turn our heads to everything that is happening in the offseason with the NBA, all eyes are now focused on the top free agents that are available. The feeding frenzy has now begun. And to be able to break everything that is going on right now in the NBA, I got my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, dime mag contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, the big kahuna, my man Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, and hello, what is up, my man?
Man, I appreciate that intro and always love how you throw the Wu-Tang in there. That's a excellent reference to those hip-hop listeners out there for us. But NBA basketball is still in full swing, man, even though the season has been over. The draft is now even over. Free agency has taken center stage, and with a lot of intrigue going on with what's going on in Miami here in South Beach area. You know, as the big three can be able to stay together, that's one of our main topics of discussion. But a lot of free agent signings to get to. We'll talk about how that impacts a couple other guys here, man. Lots of stuff to get on the NBA baseline here today, fellas. So let's hit right into it, my dude.
Most definitely, man. And you brought up an excellent point with regards to it's a domino effect. What happens to the big dogs in free agency will then now adversely affect a lot of the movements that is basically taking place for the remaining guys that are still waiting for their big payday. So we will definitely get into the situation that's going on in Miami with LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. We'll also give you an update with regards to Carmelo Anthony. The Carmelo Anthony tour has begun, kind of a little bit like Jay-Z and Beyonce with him and Lala, man. They're going all over the United States, making their presence felt. And it's some interesting stuff that's been going on in order to lead the big man from out of New York. And so we'll get into that. We'll also talk about Pau Gasol. Where will he wind up? A lot of rumors have been spread about him no longer staying in La La Land. But hold up a second. That might not necessarily be the case. My man Warren Shaw will help us break that down. We'll also talk about big news in the aftermath of the Jason Kidd, Brooklyn Nets, Milwaukee Bucks situation. The Brooklyn Nets have decided to move on. Billy King and Prokhorov have found their man. We'll tell you who that is. We'll also talk about movements that have happened with the Toronto Raptors. We'll get into some pretty big free agent signings in our free agent tracker. And then we'll also break down the rumors that have been taking place on some guys that have yet to be signed, but we are going to make guesstimations about where they'll be headed. And then we'll also give you our summer league report. All this in this week's episode of The Baseline. Big shout outs to our people from CLNS Radio, The Baseline powered by CLNS Radio. Check out our boys. They cover everything that you need to know regarding Northeastern sports, but sports in general. Make sure that you check out the Facebook page. Go to CLNS Radio. Shaw, let's get right into it. First topic of discussion on The Baseline, and obviously it ain't hard to tell. The Miami Heat, the big three, Chris Bosh, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, had a meeting about a week and a half ago, sat down, and we all assumed that the plan was all three opt out at the same time, come back with Miami, retool with Pat Riley, and then this team will then begin to rebuild itself into being the contenders that they are. But things have drastically turned, and it may have turned for the worse for Pat Riley and the Miami Heat organization. What is going on with LeBron James and his mentality? And how is it now that suddenly when these big three guys got together with like a brotherhood, like a kindred, that they suddenly now have no idea what each person is doing at this moment in time?
Well, LeBron, all he stated so far is that he wants a max deal. And you're right, you know, things have definitely changed in the last few weeks per se, where we all kind of thought the opting out was just a formality and everyone was going to be back in Miami, ho-hum, and everything was going to be great. But Pat Riley hasn't been able to swing that fourth guy, hasn't been able to get a free agent to commit to Miami as of yet. simply because they're still trying to figure out the numbers. And a lot of that has to do with Wade and Bosh and kind of what they're willing to take. So LeBron has more or less said, listen, I want the max. You know what the max contract is going to be. But Riley's having a very, very difficult time trying to figure out, well, how much money does he have left over with cap holds, bringing in Shabazz Napier as a rookie as well, and in all the roster spots that he needs to fill. What kind of team can the Heat actually field next season? So they're in a very precarious situation. It's not as cut and dry as it was, say, even a week ago when we thought, okay, everyone's going to be back. There's a very distinct possibility that one or two of these guys may end up on different teams, and those two being LeBron or Chris Bosh. I still think Miami has the inside track to make it happen and make it all work. I just don't think that they're going to get that fourth free agent that that they were hoping they were going to be able to get, as we saw a couple significant names drop off the board earlier in the week.
Shaw, it's interesting when you look at how this situation has played out. The idea was LeBron James opts out. He gets his max deal. Then Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade follow suit. They may take a little bit less money, but it should be enough where Pat Riley should be able to have that flexibility for him to go out and get the quality players that I guess the three of these guys felt are needed to help this team be able to contend yet again going into this upcoming season. But since this has now changed, now here my question now becomes, does this open up the realm of possibility that LeBron James, rather than saying I'm going to sign on a max deal, decides to sign up on a short-term deal with another opt-out clause, and then revisiting the situation again where he now is opening up the floodgates with the possibilities to allow himself to go somewhere else, and he's not going to be hampered down by the idea that he's going to stay a Miami Heat for the next 5 years?
Yeah, he's definitely not taking a 5-year extension with Miami, no matter what happens. 2 or 3 years at the most, for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, Wade's diminishing health, so you don't know if you're going to be able to that can be a running mate for that much longer anyway. But also something that's been reported widely in the media and especially on Twitter is that a new television contract is going to be up in a few years, where that's going to also be able to increase the max salary that guys can make, as NBA revenue goes up, as that BRI increases. So it looks like if he opts out, in another 2 years per se, he'll be eligible for another max contract where he might be able to get something maybe 25, 27, maybe even upwards of 30 million, depending on what the contract ends up being with the television deal.
All right. Now, with this being said, Shaw, how does this affect Miami's ability to acquire their quality free agents that they're looking for? Because now guys like Marcin Gortat, guys like Kyle Lowry, they're off the board. We'll discuss their terms and their agreements because they essentially have re-signed with their current teams. And so they're no longer a viable option for the Miami Heat. By this continuing to weigh on, how is this vastly affecting Pat Riley's flexibility and movements? Because he has to prioritize getting these big three guys signed.
He's stuck. And there's no two ways about it. He's going to have to try to convince, one of those second tier guys. He's going to have to sell them on the dream, if you will, and say, listen, trust in me. And, I'll go ahead and get these three guys back. And that just hasn't come to fruition as of yet, especially since he doesn't seem to have hard numbers. Rumors are circulating out there that he's going around saying that he has roughly $6 to $8 million. I think it's actually $5 to $8 million to spend on a free agent. And the type of talent that these guys are looking for, or that the type of guys that he's targeting are just going to command more salary than that. A Luol Deng, a Trevor Ariza, guys like that, they're all going to be looking at $9 or $10 million per year. So they're a little bit short with that. It would have helped if LeBron was willing to go ahead and take the proverbial pay cut, if you will, like that he did previously to this contract with Miami. If everyone took 14 or 15 million, but he's the best player in the NBA, so he shouldn't have to take a pay cut. He already did it. He's won 2 championships doing it that way, and he's clearly head and shoulders better than Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. So he deserves to be paid max money, and that's not his fault if Riley can't make it work. I think one other point, too, I want to make about this is, when this all came together, I guess that was in 2010, Wade was kind of going out there to recruit LeBron. Riley was able to kind of get Bosh on his own, if you will. It doesn't seem like the big three are going out and doing any recruiting of their own. They're leaving it all up to Riley. They're not saying anything. And I think that's having as much effect on what they're able to do as anything else.
Does this become a mark against this big three? Because, a lot of people in the beginning had said that in order for these guys to win championships, they needed to find a way for their chemistry to build. You look at the situation with what is now left of the Miami Heat team, with there being only one player still actually being signed. And I think everyone has aligned themselves to the idea that the thrill is gone. There's no longer this quote unquote kindredship about trying to get back together and make it all happen. We're not talking like the Boston Celtics when Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and maybe even Ray Allen to some level of degree said, we got to try one more time. We got to make it happen one more time. Doc Rivers was saying, I need these guys one more time, fighting with Danny Ainge. Why is there no fight in these three guys to bring together a team that got to the NBA Finals 4 years straight? Are they really that tired of each other?
I don't think they're tired of each other, but I just feel like, they're at different stages of their career. Again, LeBron is clearly the best of the trio, and there's no disputing that. And they all seem to know that. But I do feel like they feel like, well, you know what? It sucks that he's going to have to go ahead and get this max contract, and we're going to have to take a little less money. They all have pride, especially Wade, who's been a lifetime Heat player. So he feels like, listen, loyalty should stand out to anything else when it comes to him. With Chris Bosh, I think he's back, in a second if LeBron is as well. And it's just a matter of trying to make these pieces work. But they got waxed. There's no two ways about it. They got absolutely demolished and picked apart in the NBA Finals. And yes, the East is still, weak enough where they could potentially, stumble back into the finals again. But if you meet up against San Antonio again in the finals, or even even an OKC or whoever else, there's no guarantee that you're going to go ahead and win. So they feel like they need to make changes. It needs to happen now. And they're leaving it up to Riley. They're just not putting any stock into anything that they need to do per se. Because again, they feel like they've already sacrificed their money. They've delivered 4 straight NBA finals with 2 NBA championships as a result of it. And now it's on Riley to deliver the rest.
All right, Shaw. Finally, here's the one thing, and it's kind of interesting from my perspective because I know people don't want to look at it from that way, but I hate to say this because I think this may actually wind up happening as this continues to progress. But when you're talking about LeBron James, everybody understands about the ugliness that came from the decision. But wipe away how LeBron James carried himself with regards to making the decision. What about the way he handled himself leading up to when it became the decision? Basically, he held a franchise, the Cleveland Cavaliers, even as obnoxious as Dan Gilbert had been, even as, outlandish as he sounded with his letters and the way that he went off on LeBron after leaving and things of that nature. The fact of the matter is this: LeBron James had kind of held that franchise hostage. He held them up from them being able to do anything because they knew that their priority was to bring back the guy that got them to the NBA Finals, that made them as successful in that 7-year stretch that he was playing. With that being said, are we not seeing shades of LeBron doing the same thing with the Miami Heat?
In a word, yes. I mean, I think it is. That's definitely what's happening. But when you are the best player in the game, the best player in the world, franchises will do that. Franchises now, even at the very hint and thought that LeBron might be available, they're going ahead and making roster moves now that they may not even be able to do. Remember the Knicks, a few years ago too. They cleared out all his cap space in hopes of trying to bring him in, and and he ended up spurning them and going to Miami. So when the best player in the world is available, you hold up all your stuff. There's just no two ways about it. And is it fair? I don't know. I'm not going to say that it is. It's just kind of, the casualty of the cause, if you will. If you want the best player in the world, you have to be willing to try to make the moves and hold on to try to be able to get him.
All right. Well, we'll be waiting at bated breath to see how much the Miami Heat is going to have to pony up to bring the best player back to the Miami Heat franchise. In the meantime, all eyes are on the big three, on what is going to take place in the next few weeks, and it'll be very interesting for us to follow. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. As we keep things moving along, the Carmelo Tour began last week, and now we are getting around to where it's almost like you're at the BET Awards, you're at the ESPYs, and he's, the guy is standing at the podium, and okay, the team that Carmelo Anthony is going to, and everybody's waiting, and you got to wait for the dude to open up the envelope, and this is where we are. Carmelo Anthony has basically visited over like 4 different places, being the Chicago Bulls, the Dallas Mavericks, the Houston Rockets, the Los Angeles Lakers. And so as the Carmelo Anthony Tour winds down, there are so many rumors about what Carmelo Anthony's choices are, where Carmelo Anthony could possibly land, and how teams may actually be affected by it. Shaw, I know you've been keeping your finger on the pulse regarding this. Where are we at right now with Carmelo Anthony, and has he narrowed down teams that he is eyeing as far as his next destination being?
Well, as of our recording of the show today, everybody he visited is quote unquote still in it. But there seems to be a top 3 and probably even a top 2. Chicago, the Lakers, and the Knicks seem to be the three finalists. Houston and Dallas seem to be kind of a little bit out of the running, although they haven't officially been told as that. Surprisingly enough, the Lakers have supposedly made a great pitch that hasn't really considering potentially going to LA. Bill Simmons busted out that report over the weekend, then followed by a Woj report on Yahoo confirming it that, the Lakers are indeed a finalist. And I thought for sure, in my humble opinion, that they were the furthest away from potentially being able to bring Carmelo on. But another report surfaced right before we recorded the show today that Carmelo was playing basketball at UCLA with Kobe Bryant, and also Kevin Love was in the building too, playing a little pickup basketball. So, if these things are true, the Lakers really may be retooling and setting themselves up to be very effective this year, and probably even more so next year if Kevin Love is available to come on board. I think that's going to have some impact on what Pau Gasol decides to do as well. Rumors are that if Melo were to return to New York, that he was heavily trying to get Gasol to come over there as well, but that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. That's where we're at right now. The Lakers and the Knicks seem to be the two front runners. New York having that carrot of being able to offer him a fifth year, which could be roughly worth roughly around $30 million extra for Carmelo. So that's where we're at right now. The Lakers and the Knicks leading the way for the Carmelo Anthony sweepstakes.
All right, Shaw, look, let me give it to you straight, my man. The reason why Carmelo Anthony has the Los Angeles Lakers at the top of their list probably is not because he's gotten the opportunity to, practice on the legendary floor that Coach Wooden had built, not because he had an opportunity to ball up with Kobe Bryant and Kevin Love. No. The reason why he probably has him at the top of the list is because if you are a basketball player and you have Joel Silver developing a 4-minute clip of your basketball life, having as your narrator Tobey Maguire, the original Spider-Man, okay? Basically giving your life in a 4-minute clip with Mitch Kupchak and everybody hanging around. I don't see how you cannot knock them up at the top of the list. You know what I mean? What? Can you not knock the Los Angeles Lakers? When they do it, they go all out. I can't imagine what they tried to do to get Dwight Howard over there, because I know that they showed him showing the banners of all the greats. They had to have done something else. And I'm sure that they did something even more over the top when they tried to bring Shaq over. But just the fact that you got Tobey Maguire and Joel Silver in on the pitch to bring Carmelo Anthony, I still think that that's a big deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you're telling the lifestyle, so it's not just about basketball out there. There's a lot of opportunities, from a movie standpoint, from a television standpoint, for Carmelo, and obviously with his wife as well. Lala is very well known in the social aspect of things. So things being in New York, being in LA makes sense for both of them. I guess in that regard, it's not surprising that LA became, a front runner in this. Interestingly enough, though, I kind of want to touch on how Dallas just kind of got brushed aside. His meeting with Dallas apparently was only 2 hours long. And after the big to-do they did last year with Dwight Howard and making like a cartoon movie for Dwight Howard, I guess they felt like, okay, we're going to stick to basketball and hopefully that will bring us a free agent. And it looks like they're going to strike out yet again, on getting a big name free agent to come to Dallas. This would be the third straight year that they struck out in that regard. So very interesting things are going on in Big D.
Yeah, that little slippery slope that our boy Mark Cuban must have been talking about might not have anything to do with Donald Sterling, but just how he's basically handling all the free agents that he's looking at trying to acquire and keep striking out on. How about that, right? You're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we just finished discussing Carmelo Anthony tour. It's still on and popping. But as we start nearing down the final stretch, we are hoping to find out where his final destination is. Shaw, what do you think as far as a percentage goes, the likelihood that he stays as a New York Knick, or realistically that he does find himself, out there in possible Lakerland?
I think it's 60%, maybe even 70% that he's going to stay in New York. Money is a huge deal here. So, I mean, yes, there's opportunities that LA may present that New York maybe cannot, but I can't see them being that vastly different, especially when the Knicks have an opportunity to offer him a fifth year, and roughly at $30 million extra. So I think New York still is the front runner here, and he'll try to recruit somebody else to come over there, with the Lakers, again, having a 30% chance of bringing him over there. All
right. Well, that being said, let's go ahead and transition our thoughts over to who he could possibly bring over to the New York Knicks. And how about Pau Gasol? Now, we wouldn't have never imagined in a million years Pau Gasol talking about playing with the New York Knicks, but give credit to Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson has already pulled the trigger on a quality trade. He's found himself relevant in the 2014 NBA draft. And so now would it really be that far-fetched to think that a quality big man like Pau Gasol, a guy that I'm sure Phil Jackson would love to have playing with and for Derek and playing under Derek Fisher, playing alongside of Carmelo Anthony if they're able to land Carmelo Anthony. So, Shaw, how realistic is the possibility of Pau Gasol making headway to play in the big city, in the Big Apple in New York? And what are the possible teams still have played to acquire Gasol's services?
Well, the Knicks, again, simply it becomes down to a financial thing, and I don't think that they will have the money requisite available to make a serious pitch to Gasol. Granted, unless you figure out some sort of insane contract where, it's extremely backloaded and he makes, maybe $3 million or $4 million this year, because they do have cap space as of next summer. But I don't see how this is going to happen for the Knicks currently. Although Phil Jackson and Derek Fisher are big influences on Gasol, they would be able to, maybe soften the blow for him. And if Gasol were able to get some incentives, if you will, and other opportunities by virtue of being in New York, then maybe so. But how is that going to change from where he is currently in La La Land and Lakers? So I think the Lakers still have an inside track as well, especially if, again, Carmelo were to switch sides per se and come over there. I think he wouldn't mind staying in LA, especially with a change in coaching, but we still don't know who that coach is going to be. The two wild card teams that are very, very interesting to me are Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs. Pat Riley has also made a pitch to him from the Miami Heat. I just don't think that's something that's going to happen for them. I just can't see him going there to be fourth fiddle, if you will, in Miami. But definitely if he goes to OKC, he becomes the starter. He becomes the third guy. And, he would have to obviously take a lot of less money as well. But I think, playing with Durant and Westbrook in the Western Conference is something that you can't overlook by any stretch of the imagination. He'd make OKC very formidable. And obviously, if he were to go to San Antonio, same thing. He becomes that third scorer, if you will, behind Parker and Duncan. I think Kawhi can probably still wait behind Gasol and pick his spots. Thiago Splitter would then become off the bench. If the Spurs have that mid-level exception available, I think maybe they would be able to make a pitch, but they just made a signing too that has, I think, their roster size already up to 13, so it makes it a little bit tough for them. OKC, to me, of those teams, make the most sense and probably have the most to offer him right now outside of him returning to LA.
Shaw, it's interesting. There's also another caveat that I found out with regards to Pau Gasol. If Pau Gasol still puts himself in play and the Chicago Bulls are still in play with Carmelo Anthony, could this also be I guess you could say, a de facto way of possibly, really levying the idea of Carmelo Anthony leaning towards, I would say, Chicago, possibly LA, because of the idea that the Chicago Bulls would then try and do something with the Los Angeles Lakers, maybe in a sign and trade deal, and probably offload the Carlos Boozer contract as well, too. Is that plausible?
I don't know so much about the Boozer contract. I know they prepared him they're going to try to trade him or just flat out amnesty him. And I think they can amnesty Boozer and then be able to sign, Gasol pretty much outright if that's something that they wanted to do. And again, does Gasol want to go to Chicago? And, does he take that chance to play with Derrick Rose and, alongside Noah? I think that'd be a great combination in the front court. And I think it's, so I think it's a great idea, definitely on your part, to think that Chicago should, if they lose out on Carmelo, that Gasol is somebody that they should definitely look at. However, that also would in turn stunt the growth of Taj Gibson, who I think they're ready to make their full-time power forward. So that's the only issue I see with that. But if you get a chance to add Gasol and team him up with Joakim Noah and you get Derrick Rose back, I think if Chicago is something they have to look at for sure.
Most definitely. So we are now also looking at the status of Pau Gasol. And listen, we can talk about LeBron James. We can talk about Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade. But Pau Gasol, he is a two-time NBA champion. The guy is certified, proven, one of the best European players to play this game. There's no question that he's still got a little bit left in the tank, and I'm sure his services will be definitely welcomed on any team that is looking to fill in that gap, that front court, to have a quality big that can pass the basketball, that can shoot the 15 to 18 footer, that can still defend to some level and degree. And he's got some quality destinations to be looking at. So we're going to be keeping our eye out for that, most definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Be sure to check out our show, The Baseline. We are available on www.spreaker.com. We're also available on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, powered by CLNS Radio as well, too. My man Shaw and I giving you the butter goods of what you need to know with regards to the NBA. As we keep things moving along, the aftermath regarding the Jason Kidd situation, we had pretty much discussed it in length. Jason Kidd out the door. He's found a home in Milwaukee. The Brooklyn Nets, however, they needed to fill in their head coach position. And so who do they decide to get? They get the suave, debonair, down-to-earth man from out of Memphis, our boy Lionel Hollins. He is now going to be the official head coach for the Brooklyn Nets. If everybody recalls, Lionel Hollins, quality head coach, led the Memphis Grizzlies to the Western Conference Finals back in 2013. This is an interesting situation because we felt, I'm sure you, Shaw, and as I myself had also felt, that this guy should have been a head coach immediately after he parted ways with the Memphis Grizzlies. He's waited out a year. He's basically put himself in a position where he now is considered as a top candidate for some available vacancy positions. He is now coaching the Brooklyn Nets. What say you on this move? Are you happy with it, Shaw? And does Lionel Hollins fit the need of what the Brooklyn Nets are going to be looking for to keep themselves in a retooling rather than rebuilding process?
I think he fits the tough-mindedness that you need from a coach that's going to be in the New York media for sure. And with defensive first, he's a guy who can definitely help that roster achieve some of the goals that they might have fell a little bit short on last year, especially after losing Lawrence Frank or whatever they decided to do with him, casting him off, if you will. Offensively, that's still kind of a work in progress. And I think Brooklyn could be better in that regard in general. And I don't know if Hollins is going to make them better in that way. But I definitely feel like from a defensive standpoint and from a toughness standpoint, Lionel Hollins is a great coach and should do wonders for this veteran roster. Assuming Kevin Garnett does indeed come back after this fiasco that happened, and if they're also able to retain Paul Pierce as well, those are two big question marks for Brooklyn and see what their future holds. But they've also had a couple of different roster moves. AK, I think, opted in. I think Allen Anderson opted out. There was supposed to be a trade with Jarrett Jack and Marcus Thornton, but now that kid's gone. I don't think that's happening anymore either. So the roster still very much in flux, but Lionel Hollins should do a great job with whatever he has to work with.
Shaw, this move to me with Lionel Hollins, I think is a well-grounded move because no more, if you've got a team that has quality veteran players in Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, and then, whatever happens with Paul Pierce per se, but you still have Kevin Garnett, and then you've got a guy on the rise, on the uptick like Mason Plumlee. Lionel Hollins knows how to, get these young guys to play at a high level. When you've got this kind of mix, this kind of flux, he fits that bill. Listen, this is the same dude that basically threw out the quote, when you have champagne taste, you can't be on a beer budget. And I'm sure that with a comment like that, it may not have sat well with the Memphis brass, but when you got a money spender like Prokhorov behind you, and you got a guy like Billy King who's willing to roll the dice and take some chances, that might bode well when you have that kind of combination. And you're right. If Lionel Hollins can figure out a way to put together a quality offensive system that allows the Brooklyn Nets to stay consistently good offensively. Defensively, I don't think is going to be a question because the Brooklyn Nets were a solid team defensively last year, but they weren't consistent offensively. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. But I completely agree with you in the sense that I think that Lionel Hollins is a sound choice that the Brooklyn Nets need to make because they can't fumble around with this roster any longer unless the intent is that they're willing to blow it up.
Yeah, 100%. I'm looking at the roster now and I'm just like, well, offensively, Brook Lopez is supposed to be able to carry that load if he comes back, assuming he can come back healthy. So that will help them greatly in however they move forward. But Marcus Thornton is going to be there for the full entire year, assumingly so. So he's a guy who will be able to provide some punch off the bench. But the key really is going to be Paul Pierce. Does he stay? Does he come back? Is he still able to start? And be that quality three-man? Even he was playing a little bit of four last year as well. Or do they have to go to Mirza? I think they're also looking at their Euro Bogdanovic, trying to bring him back over to see, he may be able to plug and play next season. So Brooklyn has a lot of things that they're trying to work out right now from an offensive standpoint. But defensively, they should be sound. I don't think they're going to have the rough start they had last year, and then, finish wherever they finished. I think it was a 6th seed. I think they can definitely be a top 4 seed if in the Eastern Conference, assuming everybody comes back and Hollins can get them to play defense and figure out a way to get some offensive magic working as well.
All right. Well, all eyes will be at the Barclays Center with their new man, Lionel Hollins. I cannot wait to see this guy because as much as people talk about, the players and they get on him, it's always good to have a real savvy coach who knows how to get around the media and who also knows how to address his players. And listen, Lionel Hollins is not afraid of his players. I think if more than anything else, one thing that I definitely feel like that stands out is he's made some players that quote unquote have a prima donna complex kind of get them right. Guys like Darren Williams and Joe Johnson, I feel like their money merits more than what their play has been showing. And I think if you got a guy like Lionel Hollins who's going to make these guys accountable, it's very easy to see through the fog. Because when you're a general manager, the only thing that you're looking at is how much of a loss that you're taking, knowing that you put this money into these players that are not performing at a high level. And when you need someone to tell you the truth, Darren Williams is just not panning out. Joe Johnson is just not panning out. That's what you need. And you got to do it at the expense of saying, hey, my coach actually knows more about this situation than the players do. And so now we're getting back to that. Hey, let's put it back on the coaches to say, does this guy fit in what I'm trying to do? And is he worth the headache and the money that the Brooklyn Nets have already shelled out with regards to this team? Because quite frankly, the question still stands. Are we ever going to see the Darren Williams of old? And I don't know if that's ever going to be the case. But if you can get a guy like Lionel Hollins who has a veteran savvy to get a team to be successful, I think that all eyes will be on the Brooklyn Nets making a much better turnaround than waiting for like that fog that seemingly is getting ready to be casted over when the season unfolds, because you just don't know what you're getting. More importantly, Shaw, the status with Brook Lopez, that is going to be a very, very big question for the Brooklyn Nets, right?
Yeah, 100%. Lopez is a guy who they've been leaning on. And he's been banged up for the last few years, but when he's healthy, he's been produced, especially from a point standpoint. Definitely needs to become a better rebounder. But the surgery that they did allegedly is supposed to prevent his injuries from happening forward. I think it's like, I forget exactly the technicalities of it. I'm not a doctor, nor did I say it at Holiday Inn last night, but they moved one of his bones around to kind of flatten out the foot a little bit to prevent further injury to it. So Lopez coming back is going to be a huge key for Brooklyn. One final note too, I want to talk about in terms of the coaching things. Look at just some of these guys, and you look at Lionel Hollins. He stood out a year. Now he's got a good job here in New York. Van Gundy, I think he was out 2 years. He's got a good job in Detroit. Even Alvin Gentry, who was an assistant coach, and he's not an assistant coach anymore. He's still an assistant coach, but he moved to the Golden State Warriors, in a higher position as well. So, people who've been able to wait out things a little bit, some of these veteran coaches as the new guys get their shots. It looks like some of these old guys still have some tricks that they're able to pull out, and, their patience is starting to pay off a little bit.
You got to love how they reinvent the wheel, and that's exactly what Lionel Hollins loves doing. He loves reinventing the wheel. We'll see what kind of wheels are spinning out there in Brooklyn as the season unfolds. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Be sure to check out my man Warren Shaw, available on the Twitter. Hit him up at Shaw Sports NBA. Hashtag it up, The Baseline, if you got questions or comments or thoughts in regards to this week's podcast. He will be one of the matriarchs to be able to respond to those questions. You could also get at me at GameFace Lee, or you can get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_The Baseline. Hashtag up The Baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. As we keep things moving along, Shaw, out in Toronto, listen, man, your boy, Masai, I'm going to start calling him the Messiah, because this guy continues to make moves that will allow the Toronto Raptors to be talked about as a relevant and viable basketball team. We thought that this could probably be a one-hit wonder if they weren't able to keep a guy like Kyle Lowry. Check that. Kyle Lowry decides to stand north of the border. He loves what's going on in Toronto, and he thinks that he can be a key cog in allowing the Toronto Raptors to be successful in the Atlantic Division. Oh, and one more other note, they decided to trade and get Lou Williams. Now, you and I were really big on Lou Williams when he was doing this thing out in Philly. We were big on him before his injury when he was playing out in Atlanta. We felt like, maybe to some level and degree he should be the starting two. But it just seems like he's better coming off the bench. I guess he's got that Jamal Crawford mechanism in him. Now he finds himself playing in Toronto. That team offensively just got a little bit better. If and when Lou Williams is fully healed up from that ACL injury, Shaw, what do you think about this move? And yet again, is this another blockbuster move under the radar being done by Masai?
Hey, great addition for Masai there, especially with Lou Williams. Obviously, getting Kyle Lowry was a key component of everything Toronto was doing. They couldn't lose a guy who was a borderline all-star last year and can expect to be contenders again next year. But it's locking him up for 4 years or 48 million is really relative bargain, if you will, especially in today's market. So that was a key. But Lou Williams is going to be able to come in there and back up both guard positions, especially if they're unable to retain Grievous Vasquez at the point guard position. But I think they might. But Williams will be able to back up both positions. A guy who can shoot the three, obviously space the floor a little bit and create his own shot. I think he would be great pairing up with DeMar DeRozan at times as well, and maybe even allow Lowry to play a little bit of off guard if necessary. So great two moves there. They also made a move, I think, getting rid of the contract with Steve Novak. I think they dumped that over out on Utah. So Toronto is definitely in a position to be contenders for a legitimate future. Probably need to shore up that small forward position a little bit. Terrence Ross seems like he's still developing, but Toronto is definitely in good position for next season.
Most definitely. The Toronto Raptors poised to cash in. Interesting salary cap trip. According to these reports, the Raptors acquiring Lou Williams also have the rights to the Brazilian prospect Lucas Nogueira from the Atlanta Hawks in this trade for John Salmons. So John Salmons, he packs his bags. He moves over to Atlanta. Might not actually be a bad deal for the Atlanta Hawks because they do have a veteran guy, a guy that does like to score, comes off the bench, provides some quality minutes, and I think he could see some more time under Coach Budenholzer. So I think it's an interesting trade for all parties, but definitely the better deal, better side of that deal, moving to the Toronto Raptors, getting a quality shooter, a quality guy in Lou Williams. The guy is just, he's really, really a fantastic player. He just has not been able to stay on the floor long enough for us to be in awe of his gameplay. So we're looking out for that. Finally, Shaw, as we end things off regarding the main topics of this week, Jameer Nelson has been waived by the Orlando Magic. Now, before I start throwing question marks all over the top of my head, and if people had me on video, they would see big, big question marks. I'm trying to understand this because to me, it just seemed like really a conundrum in my head why Rob Hannigan has decided to waive Jameer Nelson when between all the way up until this point, leading back to the All-Star break, there had been so many discussions and talks about the Orlando Magic figuring out a way to trade Jameer Nelson. Now that we're at this particular stage of the season, they're no longer interested in trading him. They decide to trade. They decide to release or to waive basically one of the founding members during a successful period, understand Van Gundy, with a guy like Jameer Nelson. What gives by this move by the Orlando Magic?
It's a very good question. A lot of people were kind of stunned by it. They were very, I want to say apologetic, but just very sincere in letting him go. If you saw any of the social media stuff that they put out there, even stuff that's on the Orlando Magic website currently, in regards to Jameer Nelson, was always a class guy, professional guy, somebody who was really endeared in the Orlando community and, handled himself well. So they just felt like, this was a business decision. He did nothing wrong. He was owed $8 million, but they basically bought him out for $2 million. So they saved $6 million on the deal. And maybe that's what it is. They weren't able to find a taker for the $8 million that he would have been owed if traded. Which is still a little bit odd, especially in a year which it was his final contract year. So, I find that odd that they weren't able to move him at that. But now he becomes a free agent and is a guy who a lot of teams could be looking at, to be a backup point guard or maybe even, do some spot start duty as well. I look at Indiana as a team who definitely needs some ball handling and a guy who can definitely shoot the three ball. Indiana would be a great fit for him. I think Chicago, especially if they're unable to keep DJ Augustine and, who knows what happens with Derrick Rose. So, you get a starter quality guy if you were to bring Jameer in over there. I thought the Clippers would have been a good spot for him as well, but they just signed Jordan Farmer, so I kind of lose them out of that. But those two other teams, Indiana and Chicago, I think would be great for Jameer Nelson. The Miami Heat are also rumored to have some interest too, especially if they let Mario Chalmers go.
Shaw, real quick, is Jameer Nelson still considered a starting point guard, or do you see his better days with him coming off of the bench?
I think he can be either. I really do. I don't think he's a guy who's not capable of starting. I think the minutes are just what always an issue for him. So he might be best suited now simply because, he's a little bit older and he's a little bit injury prone, but he definitely can produce starter type production, if you will, if given the minutes and if he's able to be healthy. But a reduced role as a backup playing 20, 25 minutes a game, I might do him wonders, especially in a winning situation on a contending team. If I was a contender, I'd be calling up Jameer Nelson myself.
All right. Listen, statistically, Jameer Nelson produced. He even made it so that it really made it hard for Jacques Vaughn to not continue to play Jameer Nelson and to have him continue to start at the expense of them desperately trying to put Victor Oladipo at that point guard position. And now, given the way that the Orlando Magic has drafted, I mean, I don't know really whether or not the intent or the idea now is that because they released or because they waived Jameer Nelson, that solidifies the idea of making Victor Oladipo that 2, because they just, we'll get into the free agency tracker in a moment. They drafted Elfrid Payton from out of Louisiana Lafayette. They signed Ben Gordon. So I'm presuming that the idea is that they want Victor to be that point guard. They no longer want him at the 2. They don't have Aaron Aflalo, so he's no longer playing at the 2. So what is the mindset behind the Orlando Magic in doing this at this particular junction?
Well, I mean, they want to be young, and they want this young team to be able to grow together. And that's what it boils down to. The word on Oladipo was still not very clear whether or not they wanted to play the 1 or whether they play the 2. I don't think they're ready to hand the keys of the kingdom to Elfrid Payton just yet to be the starting point guard. So Oladipo might be forced to be into a little point guard duty going into next season. However, I really feel like, and I think they feel like, he's going to be a more natural 2. So that's just gonna he's gonna have to be a combo guard. And again, especially with all the comparisons he had coming into the draft last season, kind of like Dwayne Wade, if you will. Dwayne Wade was a 1 and 2 for the first 2 years of his career, and then basically in year 3 they moved into the shooting guard position full time. So I think they're going to go ahead and kind of experiment with Oladipo, having him play with the ball in his hands a little bit. But I think eventually he's going to be a full time shooting guard, and they may do something else at that point guard position, especially while they let Elfrid Payton develop.
All right, you're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Time now. Oh yeah, it's time.
Time now for the F.A.T. Report.
This is the F.A.T. Report, powered by the Baseline along with CLNS Radio, as we keep you up to date on the recent signings and acquisition in the NBA. Kyle Lowry feels like he started something up north, and with the Raptors has decided to re-sign on a 4-year, $48 million deal. Out in Dallas, Mark Cuban finds no slippery slope, re-signing his franchise player Dirk Nowitzki, 3 years, $30 million. The German sharpshooter remains in the Big D. Out in LA, it's Spencer for hire as the Los Angeles Clippers land power forward center Spencer Hawes and sign him to a 4-year, $23 million deal. In DC, Marcin Gortat forces the Wizards to pull out the big guns to the table. 5 years, $60 million on the max. He stays in Washington. Out in Boston, Danny Ainge stays loyal and re-signs Avery Bradley with the Celtics. 4 years, $32 million. Darren Collinson finds his kingly character, signing with the Sacramento Kings. He signs for a 3-year, $15 million deal. Chris Captain K-Man has new digs for his game and grisliness, backing up LaMarcus Aldridge and Robin Lopez in Portland. 2 years, $9.8 million deal. Out with the old and in with the obsolete, abandoned shooting guard Ben Gordon has decided to give his career a makeover in the city beautiful, playing for the Orlando Magic. 2 years, $9 million. Devin Harris, back in Dallas again, decides to re-up on a 3-year, $12 million deal. Out in Brooklyn, Sean Livingston, he moves from the East Coast to the Bay Area, signing with the Golden State Warriors on a 3-year, $16 million deal. Jody Meeks locked down 3-year deal with the Detroit Pistons. Out in Cleveland, CJ Miles has moved from being an Ohio player to an Indy Pacer, signing with a 4-year, $18 million deal to play for the Pacers. Spurs keep their future and core close to the hip, re-signing Patty Mills on a 3-year, $12 million deal. They're also happy to keep the Eiffel Tower, their front court Boris Diaw, happy and lucrative, re-signing their man to a 3-year, $22 million deal. Out in Toronto, re-signing their big boy Patrick Patterson, backup power forward and center, 3 years, $18 million. Out in Atlanta, the Hawks have pulled a piece of the Oklahoma City Thunder Western Conference Finals team of 2012, yanking Tybo Cephalosha, who will be eating his croissants, out in a 3-year, $12 million deal in the Dirty Bird of Atlanta. And finally, Jordan Farmar, same arena, different jersey, signing on a 2-year deal, replacing Darren Collison as the backup point guard for the Clippers. All right, and that was the free agency tracker brought to you by the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. So Shaw, let's just basically bare bones break it down. Which free agency signings has stood out to you, really has already made an instant impact in regards to teams and in regards to the NBA, shaking the foundation that we're not going to be talking about because of the big guys still being left out there to be waited to be signed?
Well, I mean, you already kind of touched on Kyle Lowry in Toronto and what that meant to that organization. I think Mark Cuban go ahead and re-signing Dirk Nowitzki kind of signifies that they're pretty much out of the big names free agents out there. Nowitzki agreed to a 3-year deal worth $30 million. And more than anything else, like I said, it just signifies that, listen, their pitch to Melo was not something that was really going to work out for them. They have no real shot at LeBron, and they have no real shot at anybody else out there that's of the bigger names right now. So I think that's a huge telling sign for the state of Dallas Mavericks right now. Staying along the same lines with them, they re-signed Devin Harris, which I thought was an interesting move. They're rumored to be buying out Raymond Felton, who they acquired in that Tyson Chandler trade with Jose Calderon and Samuel Dellenberg with the Knicks, right before the draft. So Devin Harris now more or less becomes the incumbent point guard as a starter. And my note on that is just Harris has been very good in the last few years simply because he's had a reduced role. If you go ahead and try to make him a starter again, I think you're going to see some benefits that are not to your advantage if you're the Dallas Mavericks. But I caution them on that signing. It was only 3 years at $12 million. So, hopefully it works out for them. But I still think they would need a legitimate point guard to come into that position. Spencer Hawes going to the LA Clippers was a move that I did not.
Yeah, that was a big one, man. Very big one.
Did not see that coming, especially after the season he had. Figured he would have been happy to go somewhere and be a starting, either at that 4 or 5 position. He's a guy obviously who can stretch the floor with a 3-pointer and rebounds the ball very, very well. He decided to take a little less money and go to a contender, and he's definitely the backup guy on that team. But he allows the Clippers to have a legitimate player out there who's not afraid to take and make shots, especially from the free throw line in the fourth quarter if the Clippers need to sit DeAndre Jordan. That's a huge signing. I think the Blazers were interested in him at first, and he kind of spurned them to go with the Clippers, I guess, who he feels is a little bit in a better position than the Portland Trail Blazers are.
Shaw, real quick, on this thing regarding Spencer Hawes, you remember last year, Doc Rivers tried this experiment out with Byron Mullins. So what exactly is it that Spencer Hawes brings to the table that they couldn't get out of Byron Mullins before they shipped him off?
Hawes is just a better player. He's just, he's a lot more consistent. He is a better rebounder. He is a better shooter. And he has the confidence that's necessary to be on a contending team. Mullins is a guy who just, he's a little bit wishy-washy. And for a 7-footer, he just doesn't do enough besides shoot the basketball. And even then, that's a little bit streaky. But Hawes is a guy who can go inside when he needs to. He can hit the little jump hook. He's not a big post-up player, but he can hit the jump hook, as mentioned, hit the mid-range, and definitely can shoot the 3-pointer with relative consistency. So I think that was a great move for the Clippers. And again, something I didn't see coming, really kind of caught me off guard. But again, a huge signing for LA. Marcin Gortat staying with the Washington Wizards. The only thing
that boy,
the Polish Hammer, man.
The Polish Hammer. You remember that? You saw that picture that was posted out on Twitter. Rolled up into the basketball clinic, guns blazing, boy, ready to shoot down bad offers all over.
He's a character, definitely one of the better guys in the league. From a personality standpoint. Only issue I have with that deal is that it's a 5-year deal. So it is a completely, a max contract in terms of the years, not in terms of the salary. And Gortat is a little bit on the older side now. So you're going to be paying him, roughly $15 million or so when he's 35, 36 years old. And I don't know if you're the Washington Wizards, if you necessarily want to be doing that, but that's what it took to resign him. So, good job on their part to keep that young core together. And he can go ahead and anchor that middle for sure. Avery Bradley re-signing with the Boston Celtics is a huge implication, I think, on what it may mean for Rajon Rondo and the rest of this front court. It definitely means Marcus Smart and James Young don't seem to be getting the key to the kingdom just yet, especially if they do end up keeping Rondo. But Avery Bradley at $8 million per year is a little steep for me.
Let me tell you something, Shaw. I was really, really befuddled by this particular move. I'm not saying that Avery Bradley is not one of the best perimeter defenders in the game. I'm not saying that he doesn't merit a significant bump in his salary, but an $8 million year deal for the next 4 years. Man, I don't know about that one, man.
Yeah, I think it's going to come back to bite him, kind of like the Jeff Green contract, where it's like, oh, we're trying to get rid of this guy now. We're unable to do it because of the money we paid him. Granted, the one thing I think even somebody pointed out to me on Twitter when I was kind of complaining about the contract is that Bradley's only 23. So he's still in his relative, growing stage, as well as where Green was, I think, roughly 28, 29 years old. So, doesn't have as much room to get better as Bradley does. So that's the one saving sign I think you can say if you're a Celtics fan, and, as we are, that Bradley still has room to grow into this enormous salary that he's going to be earning over the next 4 years.
But Shaw, let me ask you this question. And let's just wipe away the fact that he's playing the 1 or he's playing the 2. let's just look at it, what he does at the, what he brings to the table at $8 million a year. I mean, you're asking this guy to not get you 5 steals a game. You're asking this guy to score. He doesn't score consistently. He doesn't take the shot when I think he should take the shot. If he believes in his shot, he should take it. Now I get it. At 23, if you've already shown size that you're a capable guy of dropping 24, 25 points per game, I get that. But I'm not confident that within even the first couple of years of this particular deal, that you're going to see that kind of play from Avery Bradley. So, I mean, why would you pay him that kind of money? Because that's the kind of money that you pay guys that are going to come out there and going to give you that.
Well, I mean, Ainge thought he was worth it, especially from a defensive standpoint. And, as we've noted on, previous podcasts and talking about Bradley, his defense has slipped in recent years as he's tried to get his offense to come up to par. So he averaged a career high in points last year, 14 and change. And that's good. And he could get into the 16 per game, but he's a guy who can't really finish in traffic. He's a guy who can't finish over somebody. So he's a mid-range guy, and he's been able to start to shoot the corner three with a little bit of regular consistency. But again, I just didn't see it. But again, it is what it is. The Celtics seem to really like the guy, and he's still young. He's still growing into that contract, hopefully. Darren Collison from Sacramento. Again, the Clippers were supposed to have the inside track. Collison came out and said afterwards, the Kings signed him. He said the Clippers didn't make him a priority, and Sacramento did. So he went over there. That more or less, kind of signifies what's going on with Isaiah Thomas and what they're trying to do with him, which also kind of leads back to the Celtics as well, because there was some rumored sign and trade dealings going on there. Boston reached out to Isaiah Thomas on July 1st, which was very shocking to a lot of people. But Collison and Isaiah Thomas is a very, very small backcourt, a backcourt that doesn't play any type of defense. And I don't think Collison should be starting over Isaiah Thomas, but we don't know what the Sacramento Brass feels in that signing. So that's something that I found to be very, very peculiar. I got
to tell you something, Shaw, and I don't understand. Look, I get, Sacramento, they made their play on Darren Collison, 3 years, $15 million. Nice sizable contract. I'm not even going to knock the guy for that. But to come out and basically say that the Clippers did not make him a priority, I'm sorry. I mean, seriously, is Darren Collison really the direct reason for why the Los Angeles Clippers became the team that they became last year? I mean, if nothing else, Doc Rivers is responsible for Darren Collison to actually even be talked about in as far as monetary goes, to be in this kind of range that he's making, because his last few stops have been horrendous. So I'm not saying he should stay because of loyalty, just the fact that he's coming out making it sound like the Clippers would not prioritize him. I just think that that's just nonsense. That's kind of like that prima donna complex sometimes. Sometimes it's just best kept that you kind of keep your mouth shut, you take the money and you run. You do like Souls of Mischief. Take the money and run. You don't make comments like that, because I do think that will come back to burn you if you do not show out for the Sacramento Kings, a team that has been bereft of showing consistency with the younger of talent, and he's a veteran player. He can wind up basically losing out on an opportunity to maintain the sustenance of what he just gained in this contract.
Well, DC, to me, he's a guy who is a perfect backup. So if he goes to Sacramento now and tries to become a starter, especially with the guys that are already there and guys who need to have the ball in their hands, I just don't know if it's going to work out for him. So he took the money, if you will, was able to get a decent $5 million a year out of it, and that's great for him. But his production per se doesn't necessarily warrant that, especially if you're going to give him a starter's role where he definitely struggles. So, and him saying anything negligible about the Clippers, or negative about the Clippers rather, I just feel like that was a little bit unprofessional. But again, it's water under the bridge for now. He's on an inferior team for sure. The W's are not going to become like they were in LA while he's in Sacramento. But again, hopefully he's happy with whatever decision he decided to make.
Most definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we continue to review the free agency tracking and signings that have taken place already. July the 1st has passed, but not without so much going on. And my man Shaw and I are breaking that down. Shaw, let's talk about Chris Kaman, man. How big a move the Portland Trailblazers made in getting the big man from the Northwest. He's building him a very luxurious log cabin up there in the Northwest right now as we speak.
Chris Kaman is a wild dude, man. He's definitely one of my favorite guys in the NBA, and I think he's someone who, I looked at as an underrated, under the radar free agent signing for wherever he went. 2-year deal, so he's finally off that 1-year nonsense he's been in the last 2 seasons, with Dallas and now with LA. He gets a 2-year deal down with Portland, and he can go ahead and challenge for that starting center position. He can obviously play both spots, the 4 or the 5. He can back up LaMarcus Aldridge if necessary, or again, like I said, he could start, giving Portland even a little bit more offense, to start their games per se. And he's not a bad defensive player in terms of blocking shots, especially on the weak side, has a little bit of length at that center position. But he and Robin Lopez should definitely help that team out, boost their rebounding even better than it was last season. Defensively, again, he's someone who can kind of clog the lane at times for them too. So I think this is a great move for Portland, especially after they missed out on Spencer Hawes. Apparently, Hawes decided not to go with them. It wasn't that they dropped the ball. I saw a report out there that, why did Portland sign Kaman instead of Hawes? Hawes left them and decided to go to the Clippers. So let's just get that straight. But Portland is still in a very good position by picking up Chris Kaman.
Yeah, basically, get a grip, people. Just get a grip. All right, Shaw, I know people are not talking about this particular move, but I want to get your take on this one. CJ Miles going to the Indiana Pacers. While I'm sure that a lot of people are like, who? Playing for where? Listen, CJ Miles, man, has been a durable guy, and he's shown out probably one of the more lasting and consistent impressions that has left out in Cleveland. And so while Cleveland loses out on a guy that's come off the bench, he's not been, a consistent starter, but he's always shown up. He's played hard. This guy, physical, a southpaw, can definitely cause problems, a great defender. He's now playing for the Indiana Pacers. I think this is a win situation for the Pacers and starting making up ground to try to replenish that bench.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great move for them. I think he fits what they're trying to do a little bit better than Evan Turner did. So at 4 years, $18 million, that's not a huge deal, something that they can very easily absorb and even tradable if necessary, later on. Definitely, like I said, again, he's a guy who can shoot the three and space the floor for them, let Wes and Herbert operate down low. I think it's a solid move for them, especially, since they're not bringing back Evan Turner. It also allows them a little bit of flexibility in case they are unable to retain the services of Lance Stevenson, who turned down their contract offer recently. So CJ Miles is a solid pickup. He started in Utah, ended up in Cleveland, and had some stretches there. And he's a guy. He's one of those guys in the league. When he gets hot, he can really carry an offense for a little while. And there's not too many guys like that in the NBA. CJ Miles is definitely one of them.
All right, Shaw. How about in San Antonio? They're able to keep the Eiffel Tower of their front court, Boris Diaw, happy, lucrative signing. And then they also secure their future and core in re-signing Patty Mills. Two big signings for the San Antonio Spurs. Looks like they're locked and loaded, ready to go into this offseason.
Well, the Patty Mills signing is just something out of loyalty that you'd expect from the San Antonio organization. The guy's going to be out for the next 7 to 9 months, I think it is, maybe back by February, roughly around All-Star break. And they went ahead and re-signed him anyway, 3 years at $12 million, giving him $4 million per year. If he wasn't hurt, he might have been able to get a little bit more and might have ended up elsewhere. But San Antonio was like, listen, man, you don't need to go anywhere. We got you. We love you here. And they paid him the money. And Boris Diaw, same thing. Nobody really thought the Spurs were going to break up. It's almost the antithesis of the Miami Heat situation where they were on one side of the page before, and now Miami's completely on the other side. San Antonio was never going to break up. This team had every intention of bringing back all their parts, all their pieces, and they are retooled and ready to rock for 2014, 2015.
Most definitely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. The Baseline, powered by CLNS Radio. Be sure to check out CLNS Radio as they give you all that you need to know regarding Northeastern sports, the Boston Red Sox, the New England Patriots, the Boston Bruins, and obviously the Boston Celtics. Be sure to check those guys out. They're available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio. You can also catch them on TuneIn. CLNS Radio, giving you the goods of what you need to know regarding your sports. All right, Shaw, let's get right into the rumors and all of the telltale situations that's still left to be cemented when we're talking about the NBA. Right now, much to discuss when you talk about guys that are still available on the table. There's been rumors Pat Riley's reached out to Luol Deng for his services, and it's also been rumored that the Hawks have had interest as well as the Wizards. Where are we looking at right now with Luol Deng?
Well, Deng is not coming to Miami for roughly $6 or $7 million. He wants at least 10, and we don't know if the Heat are going to be able to be able to bring him on. I think the Hawks are waiting for the Carmelo sweepstakes to kind of fall through. Apparently they were trying to get LeBron as well, but that wasn't really a viable source for them. So I think Deng is someone who could very well end up at Atlanta. once Carmelo and LeBron kind of make their decisions. Wizards are also, like I said, interested in case Trevor Ariza does not re-sign with them for whatever reason. They have Deng on their radar as well. But I think the Atlanta Hawks are the front runner for Deng for next year.
All right. Lance Stevenson. Word is he was not happy about the deal that Indy basically put on the table initially to him. Has that basically turned Stevenson's desires to want to come back to play for the Pacers?
No, I think he still wants to be there. He just wants them to pay up. And being that he is their free agent per se, they can pay him a little bit more than other teams are and can go over the cap in order to sign him. But Lance Stevenson is looking for a more lucrative deal. He sees what guys out there are getting. When you see a guy like Jody Meeks get like $6.3 million a year or whatever it is, you got to feel like, all right, well, you know what? I need to be making a lot more than him, especially when you're, led the league in triple doubles like Lance Stevenson did last season. So I think the Chicago Bulls have interest, especially again, if they miss out on Carmelo. You'll see a trend here. Carmelo and LeBron are definitely holding things up, especially for a lot of wing players out there. I think the Charlotte Hornets are definitely interested in Lance Stevenson as well. But he may have to wait until Parsons and guys like Gordon Hayward are signed as well, because of the character issues Stevenson had. He kind of played himself into maybe third or fourth fiddle in the wingman per se race out there in free agency.
Sad situation a little bit there for my man Lance. But listen, there's a reason why we call him Sir Lance a lot, and whatever he's going to bring to the table still is going to be worth a lucrative deal. It's just a question of whether or not it's going to come from the Indiana Pacers. I still think that there's going to be a team out there that's going to take a chance, going to roll the dice. The guy's skill set is still off the charts, no matter what Coach Nick says. I still think Lance Stevenson has so much of an upside, even with his craziness. So, all right, let's keep things moving. Greg Monroe. All right, there was a talk about the Blazers having interest in him. Obviously, they got Kaman. So where are we now with the big man out of Detroit?
Well, Greg Monroe is probably going to be retained by the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, they have the right to match any salary he's offered out there, but he hasn't even received an offer sheet yet, as of yet. And there's just teams to be rumored to have interest. I don't think anything solid has come to back just as yet. Atlanta, again, same thing. They're going to be looking at him. The Hornets also have that power forward spot that, especially since McRoberts has vacated it. So that's somewhere he could go. The Orlando Magic were also linked to him a little bit earlier on, right after the draft. And I just don't know how much interest or how legitimate that rumor is to date. But Greg Monroe is obviously someone who can help anybody, a double guy out there. What's it going to take to bring him on? Can you bring him on at $12 million? Do you need to max him out at 15, 16? What's it going to take to bring Monroe on? I think those three teams, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Orlando, have the best opportunities outside of Detroit, which I think has the absolute best opportunity to retain his services.
Real quick, Shaw, do you think that Monroe needs a new pace of scenery, or do you think that he's best suited to still find his better basketball days playing with the Pistons?
You know what? Hey, that's a very great question. I want to see what Van Gundy is able to do. We've talked about the Pistons.
You want him to experiment. I see.
Yeah. But we've talked about their front court and just how do you make that work in essence. Because Smith cannot be out there shooting threes. He does need to be a little bit more on the block or shooting that mid-range, if you will. So does that mean that you can't start all three of them? Or does that mean that you just have to kind of, when in terms of all three of them, and talking about Andre Drummond as well, does that mean that you have to stagger them as you play them? So like midway through the first quarter, you give one of those guys a rest and let Smith and Monroe kind of go ahead and do their thing. And then vice versa as you kind of move throughout the game. So I want to see what Van Gundy is able to do. I think Monroe can still contribute in Detroit. I think he wants to be there. But there is definitely a logjam with him, Howard, and Drummond.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about Gordon Hayward. We mentioned him a little bit while before as far as in the pecking order with regards to Lance Stevenson. Gordon Howard is still a very high interest for multiple teams. Where are we right now with the talks about Gordon Howard?
Gordon Hayward, man.
I'm sorry, Howard.
No stress. Gordon Hayward he's all over the map. The Cleveland Cavaliers.
And so is his last name.
They have legitimate interest, obviously waiting on what happens with LeBron as they're trying to bring home their favorite son, if you will. I just don't think that's going to happen. But they were rumored to be wanting to offer him a max contract. And that in itself is scaring a lot of other teams off because I just don't think Gordon Hayward is a max contract type guy no matter what team you are. So that is also kind of, limiting his offer sheets right now because people are like, if Cleveland's going to do that, there's no way we're going to even get into these sweepstakes. They don't even want to be bothered with that. But Utah said they're going to match anything. They want to keep him. He fits their personality there. So I think he's probably a best bet to stay in Utah. But that max contract stuff has definitely scared Boston off for sure. Charlotte has a lot of interest. Again, they want to improve that wingman position, and he fits some of the mold and something that Jordan would want to do over there for the Hornets. Dallas, because they can't seem to get any free agents to come over there, they have interest. as well as the Phoenix Suns too, as they wait for Eric Bledsoe to be re-signed as an unrestricted free agent.
I find it interesting that the Utah Jazz say that Gordon Hayward fits the the mantra of the Jazz, that fits that culture. I mean, when you look at the boy's haircut, it's very similar to John Stockton, so it's very hard for that to be remiss as far as us not being able to say that he would fit that mantra there. Okay, I love the mop boy style haircut. It's what's happening out there in Mormon land. You gotta love it. All right, Vince Carter, he's doing his thing. My man still balling like Jim Jones. What is the situation with my man Vinny C, Vinny Mac, Vinsanity? What's going on with him out there in Dallas?
Everybody wants Vince Carter simply because he's a pro he's aged well. He's not a distraction in the locker room. He can still hit the big shots. He's become a prolific 3-point shooter, and he's more or less pretty efficient. He just plays his role and he knows how to finish games. So Toronto, Miami, Dallas, Portland, Oklahoma City, they're all rumored to have interest in him. The Raptors were, I think, one of the first teams to report wanting to try to bring him back, and I think that's a situation that he's going to look at seriously. I think he's very happy in Dallas as well. I think those two are probably the front runners in it, but I wouldn't rule out Oklahoma City. I wouldn't rule out the Portland Trailblazers as well, but I'd love to see Durant and VC running around the rings in Oklahoma City, next season too. So VC has his choices. No front runner just yet, but I think Toronto and Dallas probably have a little bit of the inside track.
And I just want to make sure that this is officially known. A lot of these rappers out there that use that hashtag turned up, let me tell you something. Vinsanity is the one who started the turned up thing. My man with the little motorcycle thing, that's getting it turned up. And there's nobody in the game that does it better than my man Vinsanity. And I agree with you. That would be quite the combo to see Vinsanity playing some of his better days that he still has left of him playing out there in Oklahoma City. Definitely make that Oklahoma City team a viable threat once again, should he find his services out there in the Midwest. All right, my man, let's talk about our boy Eric Bledsoe. Look, this guy, dynamic player. We talked about him when he was coming out of Los Angeles, and we were hoping to see that blossom out in Phoenix, but that didn't happen. He suffered so many injuries, and it's funny how that injury bug plagued him once he finally got himself to be a starter. What do we do with this guy, Eric Bledsoe? Does he fit what the Phoenix Suns are trying to do, given the success that they had this past season?
I don't think Bledsoe's going anywhere. Phoenix seems to be happy with him. They want to build on that success. They do have a crazy plan in place where they're trying to lure LeBron over there. They were trying to lure LeBron and Carmelo, but as we already mentioned, Carmelo's pretty much out of that conversation altogether. But Bledsoe and LeBron have the same agent. Bledsoe was the guy LeBron has touted already. I think it was last summer. They took some pictures together and saying Bledsoe was the future of the NBA, if you will. So, that's something to kind of watch, for a little bit. But I think Phoenix has the inside track to retain his services. Milwaukee Bucks are the only other team that I've seen out there that has shown any interest in bringing him in, which is very interesting because I don't know what that means for the future of Brandon Knight. And especially now with a new coach and Jason Kidd. But I think Phoenix probably is going to be able to keep Bledsoe. It may take a max deal in order to do that, which I don't think he's worth just yet. But there's a lot of money being thrown around the NBA, especially in free agency right now. So we'll see what happens with EB.
Shaw, I got to ask you this question because you brought up an excellent point with regards to Eric Bledsoe having the same agent as LeBron James. Why didn't the Miami Heat try and make a play maybe for Eric Bledsoe? And listen, I understand that, Dwayne Wade plays quote unquote that 2 position, but Bledsoe plays the point guard position as well too. So would that not have been quite the combination? Bledsoe, LeBron, Dwayne Wade, maybe Chris Bosh, or maybe if they couldn't keep Bosh, they could probably send Bosh out there to Phoenix. How come that was never entertained?
I think it's just a matter of the money. So if Bledsoe can make a max, if he's looking at a max deal right now, there's no way that he'd be able to fit into Miami's salary cap structure, especially with needing to bring back those 3 and still fill roster spots. I think Norris Cole was the only guy they have under contract or something like that. So they basically have 14 spots that they need to fill. I just don't think Bledsoe, for what he'd command out there, is somebody that they can realistically bring in. Again, unless you have LeBron talk to him, say, hey man, go ahead and take, $7 million, $6 million, as a contract extension. But again, Phoenix has the right to match anything. So if if Miami signed him to an offer sheet of something that low, then Phoenix is like, hell yeah, we're keeping him, and they get a bargain out of it. You know what I mean? So it doesn't work to Bledsoe's advantage at all in that scenario.
You know those fruitcakes would be sent in the boatloads over to Miami. Pat Riley would basically have to install a whole new room in that household for all the fruitcakes to be sent in Phoenix, thanking them for that kind of deal.
The Suns would be like, you done effed up now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, and they bring back Bledsoe in a heartbeat.
All right, you're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot butter topics of the NBA, powered by CLNS Radio. Finally, Shaw, my man, your boy, the godson of Boston Celtics basketball, Paul the Truth Pierce. Obviously, he's no longer playing for the Boston Celtics. He played with the Brooklyn Nets. What's happening, man? What's my man Paul really trying? What's Paulie trying to do these days, Shaw?
I think Mr. Pierce is trying to go back to LA, man. I think he'd want to, go home, play under Doc. He still has a lot of love for that man. And think the Clippers are obviously in a situation where they can definitely use some small forward help. Things didn't work out for them with the Hedo Turkoglu's and Danny Grangers of the world. And Pierce can go ahead and just definitely be a complimentary guy and not really have to do too much, but give that team another leader, another guy who can hit big shots in the end. I think the Clippers are probably the front runners per se if they can find a way to make the money work. Apparently, Doc Rivers has tried to engage Brooklyn in some sort of sign and trade talks. Brooklyn is having none of it, especially after they invested so much to get Pierce over there along with KG. They're not going to try to help any team bring him or take them away from him. So I think, Pierce is going to probably have to accept a minimum deal or, maybe like a biannual exception or something like that to go to LA. The Blazers have reported to have some interest. The Lakers have some interest too. And if they're able to pull off the Carmelo thing, then you just never know, would he then consider potentially going over there and being second fiddle or third fiddle, if you will, behind Carmelo and Kobe. So that's something definitely to watch. And Brooklyn obviously still has a very good chance to retain him. If KG can get in his ear and can say, hey, I'm coming back too. Let's see what we can do under Lionel Hollins. Let's try to give this another crack at it in the Eastern Conference. We'll see if Pierce if KG does that and then if Pierce is responsive.
Can KG play my brother's keeper to get Paul Pierce to stay?
He can. Those two, they have a relationship that has formed ever since KG got in Boston, and it's very real. And Garnett said he wouldn't have gone to Brooklyn if Pierce wasn't there. So, if Garnett decides to come back for another season, which all indications are he will at $12 million per year, so those are 12 million good reasons to come back. I think he's going to want his brother Paul Pierce to join him back in Brooklyn and try to see if they can finish what they started, hopefully with a healthy Brook Lopez.
Most definitely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and that was our free agent tracker report. Big up to my man Warren Shaw for keeping his finger on the pulse with everything going on regarding the rumors and also with the guys that have actually been signed. Continue to listen to us here on the Baseline. Make sure you check with us, man. We're going to continue to keep tracking these dudes down. Every time a guy gets signed, we're putting them on blast here on our show. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or you can get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA_the Baseline. Hashtag it up with the Baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Segment of the Baseline is brought to you by Beats and Eats, hosted by Nick Gelso and Ty Ray. The Beats and Eats podcast network combines great sports talk with pop culture, movies, TV shows, entertainment, cooking, dining, and wine topics. Be sure to check out one of the hottest podcasts available on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, one of the most listened to podcasts over the last 2 weeks, Beats and Eats, powered by CLNS Radio, hosted by Nick Gelso and Ty Ray. Be sure to check those guys out, Shaw. All right, it's about that time for the Summer Report. And obviously, it's already on and popping out in Orlando, the NBA Summer League. And we have some debuts to talk about. We got some rookies who have finally gotten their first taste of NBA basketball. And we got some sophomoric returns. So let's get right into it. Topic of discussion everyone has been talking about right now, Shaw. Philadelphia 76ers, their boy Nerlens Noel finally got on the marquee floor. What was your impressions about how he played in his first game in the NBA Summer League?
It was great to see the young man get some court time. I think he played very well for a debut. I think I even tweeted out, if you would have told me he had 19 points and 2 rebounds, I would expected it to be the other way, maybe 2 points and 19 rebounds. But offensively, he was very active around the rim. Didn't have much of a jump shot to speak of per se, but he made, I think, all of his free throws. I think he was 7 of 7 from the line. And again, just very, very active around the rim. extremely long. I saw him pick guards at the top of the key a couple of times when he was switched on pick and roll. He was able to pick those guys clean, ended up with 4 steals, ended up with 1 block as well in his debut. Very, very positive things. I think there's a lot of dissonance right now among NBA general managers saying like, damn, why didn't we draft him? Why didn't we wait a year? And I think Noel is, definitely going to have a very big future. So seeing what Philadelphia is able to do, then we see what happens when Joel Embiid gets ready to be back. You know what? Maybe this might actually work after all.
All right. Now, let's go ahead and focus our attention over in Boston land. Marcus Smart, he found himself on the basketball court. James Young did not play. What were your impressions about Marcus Smart? One thing that I noticed, Shaw, was that I felt like he looked a little bit out of shape, and maybe at times he even looked a little winded. But that's because I believe that obviously you're now transgressing. You're transferring yourself from playing college basketball to the NBA basketball, which the speed is obviously 10 times faster. But what were your thoughts about what you saw from Marcus Smart on the court?
Everything that you would have thought of, from his scouting reports, tough, big body, physical, great defender, has to work on that outside shot. I think, he was, what was it, 3 of 8 or something like that. And he was 0 of 5 from the 3-point line. So basically he was 2 of 8, sorry. And basically he was able to make everything, do pretty well from the mid-range standpoint. So I think he needs to just go ahead and ixnay that 3-point shot altogether this season and be, try to be a mid-range jump shooter. Was able to get in the lane, was able to pass and shoot, was able to drop off some guys, down on the block too when he was able to penetrate. So very good debut from him. Also think he had 4 or 5 steals as well. Defensively, very impressive. So Marcus Smart did a very great job for the Boston Celtics. Just needs to work on that offensive shot a little bit. All
right, now let's go ahead and talk about Aaron Gordon. The number 4 pick from the Orlando Magic. A lot of people had talked about this being more so the controversial pick because they didn't anticipate Gordon to be this high. What were your impressions on his display on the floor? I think he went like 9. He had 9 and 6. Looked like he was really, really active. Do you think the Magic are happy with what they're going to be able to see or what they're going to be able to get out of Aaron Gordon, knowing what they got from that first game?
I think there was a great quote by the broadcast team last night, while I was watching that game, is like, listen, he's not the guy. He's a piece of a puzzle, if you will, but he's not a building block per se. And I think they're happy with that. They want Oladipo to be that dude. They may try to build around Vucevic a little bit. And Gordon is a guy, if he does turn out to be anything like Sean Marion per se, will just be a guy who's energy and give you 16 and 7, 16 and 8 per game, once he's up to par. Definitely not in his rookie season. I don't think he's going to get those kind of numbers, but, maybe a little bit down the line. Again, the energy he brings, he's very physical. Great defense. I don't know if you saw that block he had, where he more or less just took the ball right out of the air. I think he's someone who's definitely going to be able to contribute to that roster. And I think it was a good pick for them at number 4. A little surprising, but nonetheless, I think, they're going to be happy with him.
All right. Now let's talk about those sophomoric returns. Victor Oladipo back with the Orlando Magic. Kelly Olynyk from the Boston Celtics. Mason Plumlee from New Jersey, from the Brooklyn Nets, and Marcus Teague. Which guys really stood out to you, really kind of caught your eye that you're actually seeing that progression from what they did in the first year that, they're basically looking to come in and dominate like our boy Andre Drummond did last summer league?
Well, it's Plumlee more than anything else because, Oladipo, I think, is an established guy. He's obviously going to be a star. Olynyk had a great summer league last year, kind of lit it on fire. And it's just it's a place for him to, really kind of just hone his skills a little bit. But Plumlee, I just didn't expect to see some of the things I saw, especially with some of the moves he did with his left hand. He finished maybe 3 or 4 shots, moving to his left and with his left hand off the glass, a couple dunks as well. Obviously high energy, but he just was able to show a little bit more versatility in his offense per se. Instead of just being a guy who was able to run and jump. So I was very impressed with that. So Plumlee, after the first day or first weekend, if you will, impressed me the most. And I think if he can continue to build on that, can be a huge asset to the Brooklyn Nets going into next season.
You think he's ready to put on those big boy pants and really hold it down when the Brooklyn Nets start up camp in the next couple of months?
That remains to be seen. And again, a lot of that has to be, again, is Lopez back healthy? Is Garnett even coming back? Is he not going to retire? So, I don't think Garnett would accept the role coming out the bench, but Plumlee might be able to play a little bit of 4, especially since Lopez is a guy who can shoot the 3. So, Plumlee can be there on the block trying to get offensive rebounds. He's not somebody you have to necessarily call plays for. So I think he's ready to contribute to this roster. Again, he was a sneaky pick by Brooklyn last season. And I think, he's going to be ready to help Brooklyn moving into 2014, 2015.
Shaw, when you look at the way that, rookies take to veteran guys, coaching them, showing them the ropes, getting them NBA ready. Do you see that with Mason Plumlee and the relationship that he built with Kevin Garnett, that if he got that extra year of Kevin Garnett deciding to stay with the Brooklyn Nets and even having a guy like Paul Pierce playing with him, and maybe even to some degree Brook Lopez, although I do not find him to be like the philosophical teacher of veteranship in the NBA, but he having those surrounding bodies, what kind of timetable could you give a guy like Mason Plumlee to really tap into that potential that he has?
I mean, you saw him grow this year. From day one to when the season ended for Brooklyn, he was definitely a different player. And even listening to his interview after his 21-point performance yesterday or on Saturday, in the summer league, he's still attributing a lot of that to Garnett and his influence and the veteran leadership of those guys on that roster. So I think he's someone who's going to continue to progress. To say what level he's going to reach at, I can't put statistics on it per se. He's going to be a 15-10 guy, or he's going to be a 12-8 guy, or whatever the case may be. I just feel like it's something that's going to continue to go in his favor as long as those veterans are there. And I think we're going to see a different Mason Plumlee from day one of training camp this year to the end of the season again next year. And I think it's going to be something that Brooklyn can be very, very favorable.
All right. And so, Shaw, finally, Shabazz Napier, unfortunately, he wasn't, he didn't live up, quote unquote, to the top billing that I think people were trying to put expectations on him in a summer league game. So much to the point that they threw out the Twitter out there to Shabazz Napier. And I just think that this just really unrealistic and it's just unfair. Listen, he's not going to come in and he's not going to be, Chris Paul. He's not going to come in and be your Rajon Rondo. That's not going to happen. But I think what you're expecting is that he's a guy that knows how to, be a floor general, navigate, orchestrate the offense, make some quality shots, show a level of progression. Because if he's going to be playing with this Miami Heat team, regardless if there is a LeBron James or not, he is going to be the floor general. And the expectations is that he's going to have to take up those minutes that might not be taken up by any other particular point guard if they don't obviously keep Mario Chalmers or, they completely move in a completely different direction.
Well, Napier, I think he had a little bit of summer league jitters, if you will, coming in highly touted, slipped a little bit to some degree, going at 26, I think it was, 24 rather. And I think he just pressed, apparently right now, as we record the show, he's having a much better game, but definitely by a couple of tweets and things that I saw. So I think it's just a matter of him just getting comfortable in his role. He's a guy who can rebound at his size, which, at a remarkable rate. Can shoot the three. He can get guys involved as well. I think he's gonna be right. And I think summer league his first game was a little bit of a fluke. After being a senior and a veteran guy winning 2 championships at UConn, I don't think there's something that Shabazz Napier isn't capable of overcoming. So I think he'll be fine. But yeah, he did definitely have a rough start to his NBA pro career.
Well, I'm sure that the Miami Heat want to move from Shabazz to Shabazz back to Shamo, because that's exactly how they want his boy. They want their point guard. They're basically moving like Michael Jackson moves on the dance floor. That's what they need as far as that ball movement goes for the Miami Heat to get back to what they were just a season ago. Shaw, man, awesome show. Man, we covered a plethora of topics this week, man. And really, it's just opened up Pandora's box for what we're going to be keeping our eyes looking at moving forward into this upcoming week, because there's still big names that have to be signed, decisions that have to be made, and then ultimately moves that have to be closed out on in regards to these remaining teams that are still vying for the remaining free agents, man. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening. And, hey, we still got NBA Summer League rolling out too. And I believe, you're supposed to be rolling out there at some point, right?
That is correct, man. Definitely by the next show that we record, I'll be in Vegas. Checking out the action there. So very excited to check out the guys, Jabari Parker and Andrew Wiggins and Dante Exum, and Trey Burke is going to be playing as well in that Utah backcourt. So I'm excited to see that. I think Philadelphia has decided to go to Vegas as well. So I might actually get a chance to see Nerlens Noel in person if he, makes that trip as well. So, Summer League is going to be outstanding, especially in Vegas. Orlando is, kind of the primary, if you will, but Vegas is definitely where it's at. So definitely look forward to what we're going to be doing out there, covering it for Dime Magazine, but definitely for CLNS Radio and here on the NBA Baseline, we're definitely doing a lot of great things where NBA Summer League action is concerned.
Most definitely. So my man Shaw throws up those deuces and trays out in Vegas. You make sure to continue to stay locked with us here, the Baseline, powered by CLNS Radio. We're continuing to do that work, putting in that work. We're going to try and provide you with all the information and coverage with regards to the favorite teams, also with regards to all of the players, all the movements that's taking place, man. So once again, Shaw, Much respect. Much respect to our peoples. We'll continue to cover everything going on in the NBA. Guys that are hitting it hard on the Twitter feeds, also on the internet as well, too. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw. We'll catch up with you guys next week. Stay tuned. Keep us locked to get the butter goods of the NBA.